Our next topic is OSPF areas and OSPF LSA types. Now, OSPF, as I mentioned earlier, breaks a large topology, and I've drawn out our little network, our topology on the board, into smaller, easier to configure sections called areas. So, over here between router 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have area 0. This is router 1. So between router 1, router 2, router 3, and router 4 on this LAN, we have area 0. Area 0 is the backbone area, meaning you must have area 0 to run OSPF. And all other areas must be directly connected to area 0, which means all inter-area traffic must flow through area 0. So you see I have area 1 between router 1 and router 201, and I have area 51 between router 2 and switch 8, or behind router 2, I have area 51. Now, any traffic between area 51 and area 1 has to pass through area 0. If I did not create area 0, and for example, I made this area 10, and there was no area 0, inter-area traffic would fail. So all traffic must pass through area 0, which is the backbone, to make it to another area. A router that borders area 0 and another area is called an area border router, or an ABR. Once again, a router that borders two areas, one of them has to be area 0. So a router bordering area 0 and another area is called an area border router. In this case, we have router 2 and router 1 as our area border routers. Now, let's say router 201, for just this discussion's sake, was connected to the internet. So a router that takes us out of our network to another network is called an ASBR, or an Autonomous System Boundary Router. A router that connects your network to an external network is called an Autonomous System Boundary Router. Now let's say we have, well, we can look at router 3 and router 4 here. Router 3 and router 4, since they only exist in area 0, are going to be called the area internal routers. So they are internal to just one area. Now, coming over here to LSA types. There are 5 different types of LSAs that are relevant to your CCNA course. There are others, but you don't need to know them right now. The first one is your router LSA. Every router in an OSPF topology produces one router LSA. The router LSA is the LSA I described initially when I started the OSPF lecture. The router LSA describes the router links, the networks, IP networks connected to those links, the neighboring routers, and the metric to those routers, or the cost of the link to those routers. The second one is the network LSA. The network LSA is only produced by the DR of the network. So it will only be produced on multi-access links like Ethernet. And the DR will produce one network LSA to describe the IP address of the network and all the attached routers, and all the attached routers by their router IDs. So the network LSA describes the network with its IP address and all the routers connected to that network by their router IDs. And the network LSA is only produced by the DR of the network. Next comes the network summary LSA. The network summary LSA is produced by ABRs. Remember, ABRs are routers that border area 0 and another area. In our topology, router 1 and router 2 are going to be ABRs. Now, the network summary LSA takes the network from one area, the IP network from one area, and injects it into another area, and vice versa. So, router 1 will produce a network summary LSA for area 0 and inject it into area 1, and produce a network summary LSA for area 1 and inject it into area 0. So remember, the originating router for a network summary LSA has to be an ABR, or an area border router. The fourth one is an Autonomous System Boundary Router Summary LSA. What does this do? The ASBR Summary LSA is again produced, well, for the ASBR Summary LSA, we would have to say that our internet connection is not here. Let's pretend our internet connection is on router 3. Router 3 now becomes our Autonomous System Boundary Router, or ASBR. Now, an ASBR Summary LSA basically points to the location of the ASBR, which is on router 3. And ASBR Summary LSAs are also produced by ABRs, or area border routers, and injected into non-backbone areas, or non-transit areas. Since Area 51 and Area 1 do not have other areas connected somewhere behind router 201, these are non-transit areas. So an ASBR Summary LSA points to the location of router 3, or router 3's router ID, and it was injected by the ABRs, router 2 and router 1, into non-transit areas to let routers over here know where the ASBR is. Lastly, the external LSA. The external LSA actually carries all the networks that are external to your OSPF domain. So all the networks on the internet, you'd hope you would not import the whole internet routing table into your OSPF, but selected networks, when router 3 injects those networks into the OSPF domain, it will do so using an external LSA. This concludes our area and LSA lecture. Now we move on to the lab.